So we'll just let that scroll on over. Oh my goodness. Where are my tissues? Wait, I thought
Oh, that reminds me, I should get mine too. I'll share. I'll share from the East Coast to West Coast with you.
Okay. So, oh my goodness, Nancy, thank you so much for taking your time out on a Friday. It's been a long week, and you are so precious and wonderful, and you agreed to come on today with me to share about the loss of pets. You are a pet chaplain. Now,
Yes.
first of all, that's just amazing. And you have to tell us, how did this come about? How did you specialize in this? I want to know the story.
So, I have been in a healthcare setting since 1988, 1990. And, life continues to change. And I've always been passionate about people and pets and comfortable in, if you will, the area of grief and loss. And in 2017, my black and tan Doberman Golda passed from dilated cardiomyopathy. And it really motivated me that there was so much more to doing what I was doing. I was now spending 10% of my time with patients, and the rest of it was paperwork. And her passing really struck me because she was so much more than just a dog to me. She was my soul dog. And you'll often hear people refer to their pets. And I remember 2 weeks after she passed, and she had just turned 6, and she'd been sick for at least a year and a half with her heart. And I wore her collar as a bracelet. And 2 weeks after she passed, a friend said to me, "It's been 2 weeks, aren't you over it yet?" And it was these little baby steps of people's reactions to me and the things that people said to me that really led me down the path to grief coaching and to become a pet chaplain. When you think about it, our pets are part of the family. They've come from being objects and tools to being beloved members of the family. So that was my path to becoming a pet chaplain.
Oh, wow. So beautiful. We have not really gotten to know each other, but I mentioned when I was reaching out to you that our beloved guinea pig passed last week. And exactly what you just said. Get over it. It's a guinea pig. They're throwaway. And that's really so interesting to me that people can have that about pets. I don't understand it. It's a struggle for me to not understand how someone can feel that way. And now guinea pigs don't live very long, but 5 to 7 years. And so I knew he was getting older, and I was concerned, and I wanted to make sure I would find him and not my boys. And well, thank goodness I did find him, but I knew he was older. But it's amazing how, knowing that that's going to happen, the loss. And I spent this whole last week, there's a different sound in the house. There's a different energy in the house.
Absolutely.
Because he's very calm. He was stoic, but so calm and so precious. And it's really so interesting to me. And I'm fascinated by the feelings that I'm having as a result of this. And my boys were surprised at the grief that I had. And I was wondering myself even, and I have tools to handle grief, emotional freedom technique and things. And I'm wondering, is it a compound of previous losses? When I lost my precious beloved Gracie when she was 13. And, it's so interesting. My boys handled it differently.
Of course.
And we did a ritual. We held a service for him, and we did some practices that we practiced that were very mindful and honoring him. And just today, Dax, my youngest, was saying, he said bye to Gigi. He went to see his dad for the weekend, and he said bye to Gigi, our cat. And then he said bye, Hobbs's spirit. And out of the blue, just leaving, and we hadn't talked about it for a few days, and I was just trying to see how everything would be. And And it was so interesting that he did that, because he said, Mom, Hobbes's spirit's still here. And I thought, oh no. Because Hobbes was a real baseline for me when my boys would go to their dads, and I would feel such loss at my boys, and my house would be so quiet, except I'd hear Hobbes.
Right.
Like squeal, he'd make these cute little squeal sounds, because he knew whenever I'd cut up vegetables, I'd bring him vegetables, or he'd get when I made juices, he would get the greens and he would get all that. So here I am talking about this. It's amazing how I'm talking about this. Is that what you do as a chaplain? You listen?
So I want to ask you a question, because now we have to stop. When your son said, Mom, Hobbes's spirit is here, what came up for you in that moment?
That's a great question. And as a mom,
but as a person, as a human being.
Yeah, that's a harder question.
Okay.
As a mom, I'm always trying to walk that line of being kind but firm, a mentor to my children. And so I watch what I do and what I say carefully, because I know they model what I do, not what I, right?
Understood. Absolutely.
So there's a piece of that. And all I did was agree with him. I affirmed it with him. And then sitting with this, as it was quiet and I was sitting, there is so much grief for him. And grief as in, because I feel almost like I didn't honor him enough while he was alive of what he gave me. A friendship, which is so silly. I don't know who, like, that is so silly that I loved this guinea pig, and that he was so just, I mean, I can't tell you, I don't know a human. My dad was the closest, so silly. My dad was the closest that came to this wise soul in this little guinea pig body. It's really fascinating to me. It's just fascinating. And so I know other people who believe exact opposite of, like, throw them away. You
Yes.
don't even bury them. They're trash now. They're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. That's really hard. And I don't understand that. But I know that if you're doing this as a living, as a pet chaplain and grieving, then I'm not alone in this.
Yeah. No.
And we don't talk about, I mean, there's no way I would go and put this on social media or say, I did mention a couple times to a couple people, but because they're very close to me and they knew, you were the only person that said, I'm so sorry for your loss, which is so interesting to me. This is
I'm sorry.
a loss, right? I know. And I so appreciate that. So I want to turn it back over to you, and just thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for honoring the love and the grace and the divine beauty that pets do bring to the life of us, and to those of us that do just love and honor and really need our pets. They make us somehow more whole. And yeah, thank you for what you do. I'm so grateful that you're in the world.
I'm grateful you are too. One of my favorite questions to ask pet owners is, what did you learn from your pet? And it's a really interesting question, because there are usually 2 or 3 different things. So I'm going to leave it to you. Would you like to hear the answer, or would you like to answer for it?
I want to hear. I really, yeah, I'll just.
What's really interesting when we talk about the relationship, and there's often a soul connection, and we can take religion out of it, but we need to talk about spirituality and the souls. What most people will say: dog, cat, guinea pig, unconditional love. Because Hobbes knew when you were making vegetables and greens, he was part of your family. He knew as much as your children that need to know that they need to brush their teeth at night before they go to bed. So he was as much a part of your family. And once the soul leaves us, and whatever, that soul stays with us. I firmly believe that Hobbes is still with you, and he may show up for your children in dreams. You may hear him in the middle of the night, because they're nocturnal. One of the interesting lessons for me several years ago, my dogs went to daycare at our vet. And, and there's the room. And I saw this gentleman come walking out, and he had an empty cat carrier. And I just looked, was the cat having its teeth cleaned? And behind that gentleman walked a woman with dark sunglasses on and indoors. And I looked at the gentleman, I looked at the empty cat carrier, I looked at the woman who was clearly grieved and she had tissues in her hand. And I looked at the receptionist and I said, were they in the room? And she said, yes. And in that moment, I mean, this is many years ago, it struck me that the love I have for my dogs is the same that that cat owner has for their cat. It's the same as the guinea pig owner has, and it's the same as someone that has a snake or an iguana. And what happens in society, we're illiterate when it comes to talking about grief with people, let alone within our pets. There are soul animals, and it's the topic of what we call disenfranchised grief, and it's that grief that we stuff because we can't express it. It's not publicly, we just stuff it, and it's not honored, it's not respected, it's not validated. So if you were, to text a girlfriend, I'm really sad about Hobbs, would they go, oh, I'm so sorry, giant hug from afar? That's how we honor the memory. But if they just go, are you crazy? That's where the grief gets more and more disenfranchised, and it makes the pain that much deeper. And so it's a really weird dynamic when it comes to our pets.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the kind of person that will wonder, is there something wrong with me that I feel that, especially when someone's so close to me and that I respect, and they think that I'm crazy to have a loss and I should just get over it. And that, so then I do second guess myself, and I guess that's what it is. And then of course we start to bury it, and there's that whole pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff it and then look, and that's really interesting. Yeah.
And even to because children, and especially boys, they process differently, and preteen and teenage boys will process differently. But now to be aware, and if they're a little off one day or they're cranky, to kind of dig down as to what's really going on. You've been a little bit fresh to mom today. And sometimes, especially with the younger kids, they're not aware, they're just mad, or they're having some anxiety. And sometimes it's what we call like the somatic manifestations of grief. It comes up in ways that are not tears. And, they may be, you might just see that they're being cranky and fresh with you, but you just don't know how these things come up.
Did you say somatic?
Somatic, like to feel in your body, like SOMATIC, somatic. So, you might have some headaches, you may have loss of appetite, you may have increased appetite, you may have all of those body aches. So these are, and it's one of those things that to be aware that it's there. But again, if something continues, of course, go see a doctor. But sometimes it comes up and you're like, what the heck? My whole body hurts and I didn't go to the gym today. And it'll affect your memory, it affects your thinking, and all these other things. So grief is more than just that one emotion of sadness. It can be ambivalence, it could be betrayal. So when we drill down on the emotion of grief, it's not just sadness, it's not just tears. And that's where we're so illiterate about the experience of grief, let alone pet grief.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things here, and what struck me is that we need to start paying attention then to this cause and effect, and realize how do we then handle that with this, recognizing it, and what are those things, and how can we, I almost said make excuses, because there's this week's been off. I've been off this week. There was, and I was like, what's going on? I just feel off. And there weren't times I didn't assign the loss of Hobbs as that big of a thing that it could throw me off. But as I was listening to you say what you just said, all those things were happening. that happened with both the boys, mostly Dax, my younger one. But there was all of that. And I didn't want to put it on the loss. I mean, I saw a little bit of it. In my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, there's that. So I let some things go. But I didn't directly go, okay, well, that's what it is. And this is an important correlation.
And here's the thing, they might not have had an awareness that they were even sad about Hobbs.
Right. And
So
they wouldn't necessarily be sad from my boys because they'd be embarrassed a little bit. I know from their dad is like, don't cry. That's, you know, they'd be like, but they see mama just bawling, like, mama, it's okay, you don't cry. Is, you know, and they'll be reverent. But I won't see the grief from them. I won't see the tears. And so what is that for boys and men? Because I think sadness, isn't it anger that shows up as a result of suppressed sadness?
Right. And a lot of times anger turned inward leads to depression as well.
Oh, God. Yeah.
You know, and, you know, these are important conversations to have. And here's an example of, we take a word. So let's take a word like grief, but how do you feel that and what emotions come up with that? So I was working with a client and we were specifically working around the loss of a pet. And something came up about the anxiety that she has and getting her husband to listen to her. And the husband's like, oh, it's just a dog. So I said, okay, so tell me about, you know, this anxiety. She goes, well, you know, it's anxiety. I'm like, okay, what does anxiety mean to you? She goes, you know, anxiety. And I said, let's just stop for a second. What do you feel in your body? Okay, well, and as she told me, well, you know what, I just start talking really fast and my mind goes really fast like a gerbil. And she was talking like this and then I can feel my heart beating in the chest. And then, but when you connect a word like anxiety to what you're feeling in your body, it makes it easier to identify what you're feeling. Like for me, I get a little chest pain with anxiety and then that's it. But, you know, so it's important to take something like grief or sadness to what are you feeling in your body? And the example would be how we process through that anxiety. And when you connect the emotion to the feelings in the body, that's how the emotion gets validated because, oh my gosh, my heart is racing and can you please sit on the sofa with me and hold my hand, which is what this client had wanted. She wanted some validation. So when she was expressing it as anxiety, her husband didn't hear it that way. But when she expressed it as how she was feeling it in her body, it changed the conversation and then got her the support that she needed.
Oh, that's so interesting.
How's that landing for you?
That's actually huge. Is it because when we say I feel anxiety or I feel depressed, that the go-to is, well, give it a pill, or is it, I mean, because when you were describing that and it was so tangible what you said about the anxiety. Did you
start getting a little?
Well, no, what it did was it kind of shed some light on it because it is so tangible, because it's so visceral, as opposed to this, just like you said, it's nebulous. It's this vague idea. I have anxiety. It's you know, it's nebulous. It's not something it's tangible. But the moment you described it as that tangible physical description, that's pretty clear. And then you also expressed specifically what she needed. I mean, she was able to say, I need to sit down for a moment. Can you just hold my hand?
You just sit on the sofa with me and hold my hand.
Like right there, that's just interesting. And boy, does that get to the power of simplicity, you know?
It gets people's needs met.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So it joins instead of separates.
Yeah.
And there's so much loneliness and separation in the world of grief, let alone pet grief.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. So you would suggest then, instead of just saying I'm in grief because of this loss, it would be what?
So it would be individual. And here's the thing, you're grieving, right? So, and then, we want to say now you want to have space to mourn. And it may just be like you're a little off, right? You're a little off. You're not quite yourself. You may be sleeping a little more. You may not remember where you're putting your car keys. You might find your car keys in the fridge. Something that's your regular routine. You don't have enough energy. You're not getting through and these are all the ways. So grief can show up as forgetfulness, irritability, aches and pains, talking too much, so it really is very individual, and it's just that feeling off. I mean, you're a yoga person, so if your normal yoga practice, you can meditate for 2 hours and you're struggling to get through 30 minutes, here's, it was maybe, I'm trying to remember, it was sometime after Golda had passed, and I was at a meeting, and I was just really, and it was coming up to, I guess it was coming up to my birthday, but there was something about it. I'm trying to remember. And I was at a meeting and I was with a colleague, and they were breaking us up into groups. And all of this time I'm irritable, and I am a copious note taker, and I color code and I underline. I could not take a note. And it started to really disturb me. And I'm thinking, you know what, Nancy, you're going to sit and you're just going to be. You're not going to worry about notes. But it was really disturbing. And this is how bad it was. So they broke us into 2 groups. So this is all we had to do. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 around the room. And I looked at my friend. I go, what number am I? And I share that with you because for me, I had never experienced grief in that manner. And this was several months after Golda had passed, and it was my birthday coming. And I was having all of this forgetfulness and irritability. And all of a sudden, one day, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I was grieving in a way that I wasn't experienced, but I hadn't experienced before. But I couldn't remember if I was a 1 or a 2. How hard is it to remember if you're a 1 or a 2? It's very simple. And I'm like, oh, grief sucks.
Yeah. But did you understand that? And so did you understand it at the time, or you, in retrospect, you're looking at that and going, that was a catalyst?
It took me a couple of days, and I'm in a healthcare setting, and I'm doing like a differential diagnosis on myself. Well, it's not a brain tumor, and I don't know what, because she's always with me, and if we start having a conversation now, I'll start sobbing as I share stories. But we just don't know what a trigger is. What was the trigger? My birthday coming? Was it just, I don't know, but I do know that it hurt. It was painful. I needed to acknowledge it. I needed to cry. I needed to do whatever I needed to do to honor my grief, create space for it, and sit at a meeting for a whole day, not able to take notes and just listen. I could participate, but that day there weren't a lot of notes. And we just don't know, and it's not linear. It's
okay. So yeah, let's take that up right there, because you look at any time with the death, and there's a timeline, and you think, oh, it's going to get better. And of course, as soon as I start talking about that and really look at the whole picture of it, I think of my father, who was killed in a fire 15 years ago, and who was my best friend. And it's like, yes, it could be literally, there could be a time where it's like it was yesterday. Right. And there's some days that I'm just great. So it changes the trajectory. But when you said linear, so then that makes me think like, okay, is there a time of shoulds? This is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this should happen, and this, and do this, and this.
Get rid of all your books.
So what's that?
Get rid of all your books. So there's
good.
Things I wanted to share with you.
Right there. That's what I needed to hear.
Get rid of the books. Here, point number 1. Grief lasts as long as love lasts. And just sit with that for a second. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So we don't get over grief. We move forward with it. That is a very big difference. And in that mindset, that grief lasts as long as love lasts, hopefully that creates space.
Can you
You
say
know,
what you just said after that? I'll have to go back and record
we
it.
don't get over grief, we move forward with it.
We move forward with it. That's profound. I mean, this grief lasts as long as love lasts is profound, but say that one more time, what you just said.
We don't get over grief, we move forward with it.
And that's the thing right there.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward. Moving forward. Because getting stuck is really easy.
And here's the thing, as one moves forward, it's not like a giant scissor step, mother may I, it's a baby step. If you cried 3 times today, maybe you'll cry 2 tomorrow. If you haven't been able to look at photos of your dad, okay, it's not time yet. Or if you've looked at them and you know what, and here's another analogy with grief, and there's so much trauma that gets interwoven, you know, like you're crocheting with grief. If you visualize an emergency room, you come in and sometimes you may be sitting in that ER for hours, right? But if you go to a trauma center, what happens the minute somebody comes in and they're going to trauma 1, right? The whole pace, the energy is different and it's chaos. So sometimes with grief, there's trauma, and that adds another layer on top to process. So for you, if I may, not only did you lose your best friend, there was so much more to the story that adds to the layer of, as you move forward with your grief and move forward with your story and move forward with your grief that lasts as long as the love.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, that's landing it, but let's just sit with that for a sec.
I have so many questions for you. There's this part, and then there's me just showing up as me. And then how do you do what you do? Because you're holding space for me right now. I feel that. I feel safe. And it wasn't necessarily my intention to come on to do this live and to share this, my stuff. I just wanted to share, like, hey, look, someone actually is there to help us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we don't have anybody else, and there's somebody who actually does this for a living. This is their life that helps us. This is a good thing, right? And that's so interesting, because I really feel you holding the space for me with no judgment, which is amazing, because I'm doing enough judging for myself and have that all built in. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. That's profound. You can feel me wanting to rabbit from this. I want to run away from this. I want to run so far, and I want to stuff it. I want to make it go away. I was even thinking, oh, maybe I should go buy a bunny rabbit. Maybe I should go. I wanted to stop the pain. So I wanted to, like, substitute, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even want to confront it, because it goes to my dad as well. I mean, that connection, they were so, like, oh my goodness. Just, I can see his eyes. I can look straight into Hobbs's eyes, and the depth of that wisdom and just calm, unconditional love. And my dad was always that way too. So just like, he was just calm and there and present and held the space and was good and just good. You know, there's not too many people that are just pure good.
Amen.
Oh my gosh. You know, then my mind, I want to honor them. And then that's me running away from sitting with this, sitting with my feelings, sitting with this. I want to get busy and do something.
So let's honor that you're acknowledging all of this and you're feeling it.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And it may be, and we're going to honor it because you might not have experienced these losses this way before, or from this paradigm now, to just, to give yourself that extra measure of grace and self-kindness, that
Mm.
the trauma of how your dad passed, do you know what I mean? And these are, you know what, because I don't look at you and see a victim, right? So you're, whatever your self-talk was, well, you're strong and I can, but in there we need to acknowledge that this was painful. And then by acknowledging it, that's really giving you more strength, like in a bigger picture.
Interesting, very interesting. Now, I would not have at all considered victim in there.
No,
Because
that's
I don't
because
feel
you're
like-
not.
Right.
And you're not that, but that's not your persona. So
Right.
maybe because you're not a victim, you haven't let yourself feel that as deep, or you covered it up or compartmentalized.
Oh, you mean because I'm trying to be this stoic, like I can handle anything that comes my way.
Because
Yeah.
we are women, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of that, especially with my two boys, and that I so want them. Yeah. Yeah. My father was killed, and my husband and I could not get pregnant for 5 years. 9 months later, my son was born. Yeah. And
The
yeah,
universe.
yeah. And I don't, I like, yeah, of course. I'm like, I'm flippant about it in my woo-woo way. I love that. But I have not ever sat with it with you in this space this way. And I'm doing this for myself for sure, but I'm also doing it for every other, I don't want to even just say women, every other human being on this planet right now, to know that we have to take the time to sit with whatever it is, and however long it takes, and that grief that lasts as long as love.
Mm-hmm. And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. One of my other favorite analogies is, we can break a leg. You may break a leg, break an arm, you're in a cast for a little bit, but when you've lost someone you love, it's an amputation. So why are you going to move on, get over it? No. Am I going to grow someone who's lost a limb in a car accident, is that limb going to grow back? Or they may heal and they may get a prosthetic and they're still a valuable human being with emotions. Just they have changed a little bit, they have morphed, and maybe even better and stronger with that prosthetic.
That's so big what you just said. I just need to take that in for a moment.
Well, you do that. I'm gonna see if I can find my light.
If we don't sit with this, or what I heard you say is that if we don't allow ourselves to sit with this and to be with this and to feel this, in whatever way that shows up, we're missing the opportunity to be and the possibility that is there for us.
Yes.
That, I mean, everything you just said, I saw the picture of like, yes, you're right. I would not be who I am today without the loss of my father, because I'm closer to him now in a different way, completely.
Absolutely.
But I am so close to him now. And it's funny because the same thing with my mother-in-law, my former mother-in-law, but she's my mother-in-law. And when she passed, it's somehow I had a better connection with her after, and I would always, and still do, call on her when I need support, because she was an amazing mother in the kitchen and the household. And I literally would call on her and ask for her support, whether you believe in angels or whatever.
Yeah, I do.
But there's something that is so true to that. And I didn't think about that. I swear, my Gracie, my little Gracie cat, She passed when my second son was born, but I swear I see her. I smell, I like hear.
Mhm.
It's so bizarre. And so
It's
I've
not
never heard
bizarre.
it this way. Nobody ever talks about this,
It's
Nancy. We
not
don't talk
bizarre.
about, like, we're crazy if we do.
You know,
So this is
one of the
amazing.
questions, I'm trying to see where my light went. Um,
You look great.
so the light's not getting, so one of the questions that I ask clients, and again, depending on where people are and their spirituality, I say, I try to get a sense for their view of an afterlife, you know, whatever your context is. And I said, you know, you've described Fluffy as your soul dog. So for you, you know, how long does that soul go on? You know, I'm like, well, sometimes when there's that soul connection, when the body has ceased, that soul connection remains. Has Fluffy, have you felt, I think, depending on the person, have you felt Fluffy's presence? Oh my gosh, I was sitting on the sofa the other night, like I always did, and I could swear she jumped up and sat on my feet.
Mm.
Oh, I never went to the bathroom alone, and I'm telling you, someone just pushed open the door like she, and this is real. And
That's,
again,
that is freaking amazing.
but it happens.
Yeah.
It
But if
happens.
I ever said it, I'd be crazy.
And you know, it was so
Thank you.
funny, just because we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, Golda, when she passed, her totem was a deer.
Mm.
And my other dog before that was Bambi. So of course that totem was a deer. So April of 2019, my mom passed. Well, wouldn't you know, the next thing I see now are 3 deer. And I'm like, oh, mom, that's my totem.
Oh my
And it's not
goodness.
every time I see a deer. Okay, so mom passes April 13th of 2019, and Jake passes June 13th of 2019. And I am traumatized that I have not seen 4 deer. But what is weird is my office was in the front of my house. And there was this rabbit sitting there staring in my window, like for a couple of days. And I was getting ready to move up to the mountains. And I'm like, I'm like, Jake hasn't visited me. And I'm at the sink and I'm doing dishes. And there is this rabbit smack center in the backyard. Jake's a rabbit. Jake's totem is a rabbit.
Oh my God.
And what was so, and here it is, because I'm expecting deer. I'm expecting 4 deer.
Yeah.
But Jake had been abused and he was so fearful, and his temperament and his body language was much more like a rabbit. And he'd been sitting there looking in my window.
Yeah.
And then he was like sitting, I mean, couldn't have like slapped me in the face.
Mm.
So it's some of these things, and I know the concept of totems is a little woo-woo-y for some, and that's fine. But the bottom line is, if your spiritual paradigm that there is something in the afterlife, these souls are connected to us, and that's how they remain. You know, it's that, you know, there's a soul connection with Hobbes.
This is so amazing. I'm really just like, I love this.
Cool.
I really just like, oh man. Yeah. I'm processing. I'm literally processing what you just said about the totems. I absolutely know that. There is no question. Yeah.
So I want to share another story about Jake and my mom, just to further demonstrate, you know, my construct of an afterlife and heaven. So mom passed in April. Jake passed exactly 2 months later, and he was sick. He had lymphoma, but he wasn't supposed to pass when he did. And I was seeing my astrologer, and I don't know how it came up. And she said, and I still have my notes, she said, Jake wasn't supposed to die when he did, right? And I said, no, he was sick, but he wasn't supposed to die when he did. Well, my mom passed from complications of liver disease not related to alcohol. And Jake died from liver failure. Didn't put it, but he'd been on chemo. So my astrologer said, yep, your mom took Jake. And I looked at her, and the minute she said that, and like, if you knew my mom, right? The minute she said that, my eyes just started leaking. And I looked over at her. She said, yes, your mom took Jake because she didn't want to be alone and she wanted a part of you. So I looked at her, I said, are you kidding me? Her mom is there, her dad is there, her favorite cousins, her whole running crew. Yes. And she said, this is what's really interesting. Jake said, Jake didn't want to leave you, but Jake knew that you would be okay. And your mom showed him golden energy. And 2 more times, like in our session, it came up that Jake was with my mom. But it's such a, I mean, it's a definite challenging construct for some, you know, but it's interesting, you know, with our pets, do pets go to heaven? Well, God created all of it, you know, so for me, it's why wouldn't they? But if you knew my mom, so then my astrologer said, your mom has a habit of taking things that aren't hers. I'm like, if you only knew. But it was just, you know, and, you know, Jakey he's a rabbit, right? So he wasn't a comfortable, he was always on alert. He was always, you know, so he's in a better place and he's with my mom. And it made my mom happy to have a part of me, even though she has all of her people.
Oh my gosh. Gosh, Nancy, this is such an interesting topic because, you know, we rarely open that door between, you know, death and that whole thing. But I'm going to share something with you that I think is going to spark something else. And that is my former husband, we're still good friends. He was in his late 40s. It was 2015, and he had a cardiac arrest, heart attack, and he was downtown Portland. So I was with my little ones in our home, and it was literally a miracle how I even knew. I mean, I picked up the phone and called and like, hey, I was making the chicken. He was supposed to be home. I hadn't heard from him, but he had just called me. I thought he was from the bus station. Okay, so let me just get to the point. Bottom line is, he was at a bus stop downtown Portland. Somebody gave him CPR. And kept him alive, kept his body alive. While the ambulance got there, the ambulance defibbed him 3 times. He was DOA at when he got to the hospital. And I stood up. I knew this. I had a phone call, and I knew it was. So I stood up. All this was happening while I had. So that's going on with the defib and all that. While I was knowing, I was trying to figure out what was going on, because I called his phone and a woman answered and said, the person who owns this phone is unconscious. And then that was the information I got. And then I knew where they were. I said, where are you? And then I got that information, and then she hung up. And so then I later found out that he was someone was compressing, giving him compressions. The ambulance got there. They defibbed him 3 times in the ambulance and the hospital when they got to the ER. All the while this is going on, and I'm 30 minutes away physically. And when I stood up to get my boys, and my boys are staring at me because they know what's going on.
Hard, they can feel it.
Yeah. I felt this whoosh. And I heard, should I stay or should I go? I knew.
No,
yeah, I knew it was him.
Mm-hmm.
I knew. I mean, there was no question.
Yeah, there was no question.
No physical body. But it was like this energy. And you know, I was like, what the? Hey. You can't leave me. I can't do this without you. I'm like literally in my head saying that, right? And that was it. And the next thing I know, it was 100% focus on getting to my husband. So I looked at my kids, figured out whatever we had to do. And I mean, you do what you got to do, right? But I get my kids in the car, and I'm saying only 2 things to my kids, that because the reality of what is, I don't know. And I'm not going to tell them Dad's unconscious. And I'm only going to say I said, call on your angels, I was calling out everybody. And I said, Daddy, happy, healthy, and at home. Daddy, healthy, happy. That's the only thing we know, boys. And I chanted that,
Chanted.
I taught, that's the only thing. So we got to the hospital. That's the only thing I focused on.
That's
When
exactly
they
right.
told me he was, maybe you should put your kid, like, and they were like this somber. I'm like, no, where's my husband? Daddy, happy, healthy, and home. Daddy, that was it. That was right. 4 days later, after he was put in an induced coma, they did a heart stint on him. They did, I walked in and I saw him and he wasn't in his body. He was not in his body. I saw him there. It's like, oh, okay. I just walked straight up to his feet and put my hands on his feet. Did my little, like, I don't know, stuff that came out of me that was, I had no idea. All stuff I had dreamed about, believed in, read about, but never had the chance to apply. I had 4 days, 24/7 in the intensive care unit, because they're 24/7, every hour on the hour. I was 24/7 awake for those 4 days. That was the intention. And it changed my life. It didn't change his so much. He's like still cheeseburgers, like whatever.
No, but it did, because he's still here.
Yes, he's still here, totally. Oh yeah. 4 days later, Daddy was happy, healthy, and at home, baby. So I use that with my boys all the time. I said, you want something? We create miracles. Don't you forget what we did, right? And so it's really interesting, because there is definitely and what I experienced in those 4 days with him while he was unconscious in the coma was, radically changing for the rest of my eternity. Right?
Absolutely.
As a physical human, we are so much more than this. We are so much more.
Well, exactly.
But how do I tell everybody else that? Because I know this firsthand experience. How do I tell, without people think, oh my God, you're crazy that Hobbs is right there, that I swear I hear him, that I swear I heard his little squeak when I was cutting up my carrots. Like, what? You're imagining things. You're crazy. You're hallucinating. It's like, oh, man, that
I guess we're the same kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
But different strokes for different folks, right?
Right. Yes.
Gosh, but what? People that have faith, people that have a deep spirituality, there's an energy you can feel by looking at them. For me, I get energy from people. And by the same token, for people that are without a sense of spirituality, without a personal faith, to me, they're very gray. There's a different energy to a person. It's just like a really weird dynamic. And I think, to honor each person as an individual, and just create space. You do you, I'll do me. But when you have the opportunities to share, we share with respect, like ordering off a menu. But, I would hate to be alive and walking this earth without faith in a God and a universe and angels and whomever else has had my back for 50 some odd years.
Thank you very much. Amen.
Right?
Yes.
I'm taking it all.
That's exactly right. That is literally what I did, standing in the garden at Legacy Emmanuel in the children's garden at 11 o'clock at night as my husband was in the surgery and ICU. And I literally, everything I've ever, every belief, every direction, all of it, everything. And I felt it. I felt it. And I know he did. I know, because he's considered a miracle man, right? He's the miracle man. And how can we not, just having this conversation, you know what, Nancy? This gives me hope.
Yes.
Because I will tell you, honestly, I have had, this last year has been really rough. And of course I'm not alone. The whole planet is experiencing
this is your journey and it needs to be heard.
Yes. But there is something more. There is something more divine. I know this, and I know you know this, and I know that we have to acknowledge and honor that, or we're not gonna grow. We're not going to, what was it before? You just said, I literally, you said it. We won't progress. We won't blossom into the next blossom. You said it. What was it? Possibility? You
Oh,
said,
goodness. I wish I knew.
well, you were talking about how the person with the prosthetic arm, if,
Mhm.
if they lost it, okay, that's a loss. That's a huge loss, but they can come back stronger and better
Better.
and
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 a
different.
greater,
We're going to be different. And yes, what you said really hit me. And for a moment, I was just like, whoa, whoa, yeah. And if I don't allow this pain, because I do suppress, I do try to push it away. I do try to block it and be really stoic and hard and like not look at and confront what's going on with the whole COVID and my, it's like, just, oh, okay, we just have to keep toeing the line.
but you need to find the balance, right? But with one's personal space, do you see what's over my shoulder though? Do you
Yeah,
see
I do.
that one?
Yes.
Always hope. Always. And
Tell me
here's
more
something for
about
you.
this. There's always hope. How do you know?
Well, here's how. So the hopes I had when I was 5 are not the hopes that I had when I was 25,
Mhm,
right? I
mhm,
lost my fiance to suicide in 91. And
mhm,
here's the thing, the hopes that I had for children and
mhm.
what my kids would look like. And, as a Jewish woman, I was already planning a bar or bat mitzvah, but the thing is, my hopes in 1991 are not my hopes in 2021. And it's okay for hopes to change. Now, my hope is to bring hope and comfort to people that are grieving. So I didn't have that hope in 1991, but it's my journey. And as hopes grow and change, I'm a totally different person that I was even in 2020. You know what I mean? So our hopes will continue to grow and change, and that's okay, right? It's things change, everybody wants to be a vet when they're young. Okay, but then your hopes change. Maybe you hope for a daughter, but you have a son. You still have hope. Your hope just changed.
Mm,
And it's okay. There's always hope.
mm. Oh my goodness, that's a perfect right there. That's perfect. Nancy, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Will you share with how we can get a hold of you, how people
Yes,
can find you and how you work? What's
absolutely. So I want you to do just a quick visualization with me and as an illustration, and you'll see. So
okay.
if you can just close your eyes and just settle in. And you're at home and you're settled in and you got your blanket on your lap, you're reading a book, and the doorbell rings. The doorbell rings and the next door neighbor's dogs start barking and they keep ringing, and you go and as you're running to open the door, you stub your toe. Okay, so go ahead and open your eyes. And now, like, your toe's kind of at a right angle. So share with me what you noticed about your breath when you visualize stubbing your toe.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I stopped.
And what we know about grief, and it's so interesting how the universe gives me these metaphors and visions in my sleep. What we know about grief, when one experiences grief, when you got that call about your husband, we hold our breath because it's what else can we do? So, what I'd like to do is offer folks who are watching a complimentary exhale blueprint valued at $125. And what's interesting about an exhale blueprint is when one is in grief, pet, person, pandemic, the exhale blueprint is going to be different for each of us. And with the exhale blueprint, that is how we chart a path forward after loss, so you can enjoy living again and recreate. So the exhale blueprint, and then we chart a path forward. I have 3 to offer for anyone who's watching that would like to schedule some time with me. I didn't send you a calendar link, so you can reach out to me at Nancy, Nancy, at speakingofgrief.com, Nancy at speakingofgrief.com. Go ahead and just put exhale in the subject line and I'll know how we connected.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Absolutely perfect. Wow, this has been amazing.
I'm so glad we connected.
Yes. I so appreciate you. And
my pleasure.
It's almost happy hour time. If I were there with you, I would totally bring out wine and we would have happy hour with our pets.
I know. Well, I'm finishing my water, so there has to be water before cocktail.
Perfect. There you go.
I'm so glad we connected. Love from Georgia.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Bye.
Have a weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.